Oh, hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. Woo! Today on episode, haha, 301. I am very lucky, privileged to have, Debs Wright. Oh, now, what can I say? Debs Wright, she is the founder and director of Ryhall Coaching, but she has also served 23 years in this man's Royal Air Force. No, it's not my Royal Air Force. And look, I'm about as royal as how can I say T, but that's another story. How are you today, my lady?
I am so well. It's lovely to be here with you.
Excellent, excellent. Now, 23 years in the RAF. What made you go from, hey, kicking it back in school to like going, yeah, 23 years?
Well, as ever, I don't think these things ever quite happen like that, do they? I'd always been really interested in the military because I just saw it as a way of being physically fit and active. And then when I was at university, I popped into the careers office just to sort of see whether they'd fancy an application from me. And they sponsored me my last year at university.
Mm.
And they said at the time, do you want to do 6 years or 16? And I was like, 16 years? That's a lifetime. No, 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 I'm going to do 6 years because I always thought I'd do the Air Force as a job, sort of before I grew up and before I decided what I wanted to do as a proper grown up. And then when I got in there, it just clicked immediately. It was absolutely what I wanted to do. And so I just kept doing more and more time.
Oh my, look, wow. Look, this is the thing. Like they obviously quite clearly went, hello. It's like, welcome, welcome. Yeah, we'll take care of your last year of university. Um, so when you signed up and went, yes, I'm down for 6 years, like, can you describe what your kind of mindset was? Because look, going to university, out and about with the girls, maybe a drink or two here, and like, yeah, a wild story to tell, maybe. Who knows? I don't know you, Debs, but you look like a good, fun person to me. Yeah, what can you describe your mindset? What made you like, oh yeah, you know what? 6 years. Let me just do that because that's a healthy chunk of time right there.
Yeah, it was the shortest time they'd offer me. So I sort of thought, okay, well, that's either 6 years or not at all. And I just so for me, I actually struggled in the at university with the lack of structure and the lack of framework.
Mm,
So I did an arts degree, and I think it was about 5 contact hours a week, which for me just gave me so much free time. I just spent all of it running and swimming and being out on my bike. And I couldn't see how I was going to be in the grown-up world doing that much physical activity in any other job because I wasn't a talented enough athlete to be a professional.
right.
And I saw the military as a good way of doing that. And then also I suppose I rather mistakenly thought I'll get overseas and get to see loads of really nice parts of the world, which I did get overseas almost immediately. They sent me on deployed operations within 3 weeks of finishing training. But by the time I was actually in, we weren't traveling really to the nice parts of the world, but I did see some very sandy, very dusty, quite unfortunately unpleasant parts of the world. But it was still a really fascinating experience, and I loved it.
Okay, right, because that even blows my mind even more. Because look, because it's like, yes, like arts degree, military, it doesn't compute. Like if you went, oh yeah, I was doing something sporty, or I was doing sports science and stuff like this, and like, oh,
Yeah.
I fell into it. That'll be sort of a like, yeah, you get what I mean. It'll be more of a natural fit in my mind. That's my mind. But yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. I suppose the thing that for me did sort of tie together the whole of my life was I was really interested in people.
Right.
I've always been really fascinated in how people operate and what makes them tick. And I'd always been a bit of, if I was to use old negative language, I'd sort of say a bossy woman, but I suppose a leader is really what I'd look at. And again, the military just gave me a sense that actually that was something that I could really do. I could get to know people and I could see myself being in charge of people and making things happen. So I think that was part of what really appealed to me as well.
Like this, well, that's the whole thing with leadership and bossiness. It's a fine line. Like doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or like, yeah, you call yourself a duck from outer space. You can push it you can push it one way or the other, and like someone's going to perceive it as, oh yes, you are being bossy, or no, that person showed great character and leadership
Yeah.
under pressure. Like, yeah. But like this is the thing. When you were deployed 3 weeks after you like was like, yes, to some sandy part of the world, which I dare not ask. Like, yeah, what would like how did you like sort of get from the mindset of I'm in university, going for basic training, and it's here, it's real, and I'm going for it. I did you just go in as an officer straight away?
I did, yeah. So I went in. So I was an officer cadet for my training, and to be fair, the training package is really good because you have 6 months of. I suppose that's where you sort of transition from being a civilian into being ready to be an officer on the front line. And although at the time I didn't recognise it was designed specifically for that transition from university. So I sort of went from free and easy life at university where I had loads of time on my hands and having a hangover didn't really matter to I'm trying to think how many of us there would have been. There would be about 180 of us who most people had also come from university.
Mm.
And we were put through a training package that recognized the type of people we were, but also knew what the Air Force needed at the end. And it was quite a well-structured training package. So you spent 4 weeks really looking at the basics of being in the military, which every soldier, every aviator, every sailor would do, which is fundamentally getting physically fit, looking after your kit and learning how to march, and all your weapon handling skills so that you've got the basics covered. And then after that, it's a real focus on leadership development. So, we would spend a lot of time outside doing leadership exercises, developing our skills as leaders, whether that's communication, teamwork, endurance, mental resilience. And by the end of that 6 months, actually, you felt ready to deploy. And I was really pleased that I did because a lot of my colleagues went into further training. And so they had another few years of actually training and because of the specialization that they were doing. Whereas for me, I got actually to do what we'd been trained to do immediately. So I always felt that I was the lucky one, really, because I just thought if I'm going to be in for 6 years, I want to get out and about and see as much of the world as possible and do as many operations as I can. And I suppose that's the other thing that from the outside looking into the military, people are always like, oh my goodness, you go to dangerous places and you do dangerous things. Like, well, we're trained to do that. And actually it's a real privilege to get out and do it.
Mm. Yeah, no, like this is the thing. Like as a person who never served, never been in any form of services, it's one of those things where you, anything I watch on TV, anything I see, and like it's totally fake in like the sort of realms of what the sort of reality and the sort of day-to-days and the sort of daily challenges. You can't really sort of like go, yeah, this is what it's going to be about. And sort of like some of the biggest sort of challenges I would imagine you like sort of faced in learning your sort of leadership style, picking up your leadership skills. It must have been like, okay, this is clearly what my obviously weaknesses are. These are where my flaws lie. And to most really discover that's completely incorrect. Was there a situation that was true? Can you tell me about it?
What, when my leadership sort of just worked and
Basically, you like, did you have a certain like preconception of what you would be as a leader?
Mm.
and what the reality was when you started out?
Yeah, I think so there were times where it worked really well. So there were times where I thought as a leader I would be a very focused individual who was very clear on what was needed.
Mm.
And uh, I'm trying to think of a time where it went really well would have been very early on in my career. I was out in the Balkans. And I was part of a unit that did refueling of helicopters out in the battlefield. And we'd be up in a place called Banja Luka, and sort of 16 Apaches were flying around, all needing to be refueled. And there was a team of only three of us. And these Apaches were literally flying in four at a time. And it was a case of, right, get the quite heavy fuel um, uh, pipes onto the helicopters, attach them, fill that one up, unattach, run to the next landing site, fill it up, and these Apaches would just fly around. And that was a time where I really began to realize that my training had worked, because all of us just worked so seamlessly to get those helicopters up and flying smoothly. We all knew what we were doing. We were working together as a team. And even though we weren't communicating because it was so noisy, you couldn't talk, you could just tell from a look what was happening. And that was a moment where I just thought, this is what it's all about. This is what you imagine doing, where you're sort of, you are individuals, but you're all working as a team. And for me as a leader, that's what I love, is when you've got that knitting together and it all coming together for the same purpose. So I suppose that's a good example of where it did work.
I see. And I have to ask, where didn't it work?
But I suppose this is one which I feel quite vulnerable talking about it, actually. But when I was out in Iraq, which would have been about 8 years after I'd been in the Balkans, so I was more experienced. I fundamentally thought I was a better leader, mainly because I thought I knew about myself more.
Mm.
Um, but the situation I hadn't really been very well prepared for. We were at an airport, so not on the front line, really. We were support, but actually we were being attacked every single day, several times a day, by rockets coming in, and we were losing a lot of people just because the rocket attacks were really random, and you could be in bed and you get a direct hit on your accommodation, or you could be driving from one part of the camp to another, and your vehicle could get hit. And we lost. My job at the time was loading up aircraft, so I was seeing not just the bodies going back, but also all the injuries that were going back, and it was a large number of them. And one day, my accommodation actually got a direct hit, and I thankfully had done the drills that I was meant to do when the alarms went off, so I wasn't injured myself. Although I'd been really tempted to just roll over and go to sleep because I was so shattered. But I did manage to get out of bed, put on all my body armor, hide, and then when all the walls came in, I was shaken up but not injured. And then a few weeks after that, a mentor of mine came out to visit, and I was genuinely expecting that individual to sort of put her arm around me and say, "Are you okay?" But actually, I was pulled up a bit for not having looked after other people who had been not necessarily directly hit by the rockets, but had been near enough that they had been in the vicinity of it and been shaken up. And that made me really realize I'd clearly got to the stage where I'd internalized what was happening. And for the first time, I think I'd not really been able to recognize what effect it was having on other people as well. And I think that's most probably the closest I've come to thinking, I don't know that being a leader is for me, because I realized then that you've always, if you are a leader, you've got to have the capacity to look after other people. And if actually all of your efforts going into just yourself, then yours most probably in a bit of a problem.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. Because I think that's what I think that's what sometimes people forget about into sort of today's society with regards to sort of a leadership role. It's like you're the biggest servant of them all because you're there to serve everyone else. It's not about you just running up front and going, yes, this is it. You've got to be like, you are taking the lead, but you're also being that arm around the shoulder, like going, yeah,
Yeah.
dealing with everyone else's fires, trying to tackle everything about you. And then when everything's taken care of, I would like to it. I would say being that stoic at
Yeah.
times, but then when you can find that person you can be honest with, being able to let it go. That would
Yeah.
be the healthiest way of doing it, but it doesn't often go like that. And I imagine in a combat situation, you don't have that luxury for, I don't know, like days, weeks, months, you know what I mean? End of a tour, you know?
It it's really fascinating because I think I agree with you that sort of up till that point, I'd thought that me being the best person I could be was what being a leader was about. And I think what I'd hit at that point was the fact that just existing was all I had the energy for. And not being able to be sort of that role model and look after other people.
Mm,
And I still think, I mean, now when I coach people, I do try and make sure that they are looking after themselves because I genuinely believe that the best leaders are the individuals who are role modeling, who are able to look after themselves so they've got the energy to look after other people. But we've all got to recognize at which point, for whatever reason, either the stress or the energy is taking so much of you that
mm.
actually you've not got it to give to other people. And that's almost the point at which you've got to say, I just need something here. I either need a bit of support or I need a break or just something needs to change. Which I think in most situations you can do. But in that particular situation, I knew full well that I think I had another 2 months left on tour. So I had to sort of find another way of just going, oh, okay, I need to get through this. Let's see how I test and adjust.
So what did you do for those 2 months as, I don't know, a coping mechanism, say?
So I think most probably not the healthiest. I did turn to some people and talk to them, which was fine, but actually I turned quite in on myself. I used sport a lot. I did end up burying myself quite often in the gym. And I just became, I think, a bit more aware, most probably not very naturally, of how I was communicating with other people.
Mm,
And so actually for the next 2 months I got through. And I think I did step up. There was quite a change of people around me. So I was able to sort of refresh myself almost from their energy as they'd moved, they'd rotated around. But actually, it wasn't until I'd got back and really processed what had happened that I then got some proper external support and began sort of going through counselling and stuff, which I should maybe have accessed earlier, or at least put my hand up and said I need a bit of support whilst I was deployed as well.
mm. Why didn't you ask for help earlier?
You see, that's a fascinating question. I think there were a couple of things. One, I don't think at that point the military was a place where you asked for help. There was still quite a lot of driven, unhealthy behaviors of you cope with what's thrown at you. It's changed hugely now. But I think at that point, I mean, this was before we'd gone into Afghanistan. It was before PTSD was sort of considered something that needed to be
Mm,
treated. Um, I also think there was just a bit of a lack of self-awareness on my own behalf. I don't think at that point I realised quite what it was that I'd gone through or how I'd responded.
mm,
And so I think it's been with a bit of reflection, a bit of working it through with other people that I've realized, oh, now if I were to live through that again, first thing I would do is turn to someone, probably the day after that rocket attack, and say, I need someone to talk this through with.
mm. Yeah, and I imagine it's a bit like turning the volume up on a television. Like you start out at one, two, like, yeah. While like if you're in the room and everyone's there and like, yeah, it gets a little bit noisy, you turn it up, you get to 9, 10, 11, 12, like, yeah, far beyond the level which you like go, oh my God, this is like, but if someone came into the room and went, they were like, oh, why is the TV so loud?
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
ah. And if you had the time to step out of the room and step back in, you're like, oh, wait, it is so loud.
Yeah.
Turn it.
I mean, that's a really good analogy. And in fact, I deliberately didn't take a break during that operational tour, because I knew I wouldn't want to go back into it. It was almost as if the break would have been too much. Now, you're not allowed to make those kind of decisions now. That's sort of a really good example of bad decision making, made with the best of intentions, but to the wrong effect.
Yeah, no, but like this is a thing. Like, I can only imagine you were just trying to rough and tumble it out. Like, yeah, let me just get to the
Yeah.
other side, and then, like, yeah, once I'm there, I
Yeah.
can then excel and like see where my head's at then. But whew, that is a
Yeah.
challenge and a half. Would you say after that, having the counseling, like being a little bit more aware of yourself, like your leadership considerably improved, or was there still one or two bumps along the way?
Oh, so can I say yes to both of those questions? It did improve massively, but I think there are always bumps along the way, aren't there? Because we're always learning, we're always growing. And it's the great thing about leadership, because for me, leadership really, it's just how you deal with people when you're trying to achieve a purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're dealing with people, it's just you can never say, right, tick, that's done. I've nailed people now. Don't need anything else to learn.
I know all the people in the world. It's like all 8.5 billion of them. It's like
I mean, I am in many ways, I'm so grateful that experience that I had, because when you look in the mirror and think, I wish I'd done that better,
mm,
if you're the type of character that wants to move forward with that kind of thought, you then go and think, well, how would I have done it better? And so through that sort of prism, to then go and look at other leadership styles, to learn a bit about myself, to get into this wonderful world of coaching, which for a long time I was coached rather than actually being a coach. You begin to sort of just get to the grips of what it is that leadership is all about, and in a way that makes you go, okay, so this is a theory, and it's great when you sort of read all the academic theories, isn't it, on leadership? But I know what works in practice. And there's nothing I like more than finding out something that in theory just needs to be tweaked or needs to be applied differently or works with some people, but not with others. And so I'm trying to think of some sort of stories of, I think when I then, so it would have been a few years afterwards, I ended up going to Afghanistan. Um, and that was for me, it was a much calmer operational tour, because I was involved with the local communities. But there, it was almost as if my leadership was completely different, because actually what it was all about was trying to understand the local populations, trying to really, we called it sort of hearts and minds, but engaging with them on a level that was really quite inclusive and quite compassionate.
mm,
Um, and although the situation was different, I think my leadership had changed an awful lot there, because it was absolutely all about everyone else. And a great example I can give of that actually is the Americans and the Brits, predominantly. There were other nations out there as well. We're all trying to get the Afghans to sort of communicate through television, and they were just interested in the radio. And so it was, well, actually, if we want to get messages out to the local population, it's great if we think it's all about adverts on television, but it's, if they're listening to the radio, we've got to go to their side. And so being more aware of just how humans operate and what human beings think. And the other one was sport as well. I found it really interesting that whilst I was deployed, people would be constantly trying to talk to local Afghan children about football. And they were just so into their cricket. So you were sort of having to say, right, again, it's great that you've got this idea of what we're doing here, but you've got to listen to the people who are talking to you and go to their side. And I don't know that without my time in Iraq and what went wrong there, I'd have been quite so open to learning and adjusting based on what I was hearing from other people. So it's I do think leadership's constantly evolving, constantly changing. But what's really made me do that is knowing when it's gone wrong and just thinking, what could I have done differently? How would I have approached things differently? And definitely that understanding of myself and then understanding of other people is a key part to developing leadership.
I always see leadership where the greatest lessons are learned are from, not from the victories, but always from the losses. And that's where people, like, I would say great leaders learn from those losses
Yeah.
and basically find a way of repairing it, and then come back again and get the next victory. Or if it keeps on happening, like, have the humility to look at themselves and go, right, am I the problem? You don't get many leaders what do that. Especially in the realm of politics. We'll stay away from that.
I think there's a real connection of being a good leader with being confident, which I think feeds into what you were saying there, that actually this sort of sense of, as long as I'm confident, I'm going to keep doing it. I always used to use the phrase of loud, confident and wrong, because 2 out of 3 is not bad. But actually, for me, the very best leaders, and I've witnessed some incredible leadership in the military. They're really quite humble, and they are prepared to be quite vulnerable. And actually, when you've got a leader who's able to stand in front of you and say, that wasn't what I meant, it's not gone quite right, it's really quite a leveling experience. It grounds everybody in going, at what points have I done something that's not quite right? But I do think this facade of confidence that people sort of seem to have all the time stops that vulnerability from happening.
Oh, well, like, hey, if you don't have this swagger and bravado, like,
Yeah.
who's gonna follow? Like, but
Yeah.
did that surprise you when you found that in the military, that people were vulnerable with some of their leadership? Because there'll be times where it's like, we got to go over there and this, that, to be like, yes, the bravado and the swagger
Yeah.
wasn't so much there. Did it surprise you, or when you
It
first?
did. It did massively, but it was incredibly effective and powerful. Because yes, there are a couple of times where the old-fashioned sort of cinematic, let's charge sort of speeches are just what's needed. But actually, the very best individuals I worked with, it could be quite disarming the way they could turn around to someone and say, have I got that right? That doesn't seem to be quite where we were going. And suddenly you've got the whole platoon, the whole squadron, the whole regiment on side with that person because they've been asked to be involved. And I find it really interesting that people don't lean into that as much as they do the false confidence of, yep, I've got everything here, don't challenge me. But I think you've got to be really, really self-aware to be vulnerable. And that I find really powerful.
I would, like, what I would add to that? Yes, self-aware, but I believe, like, you've got to also have trust in the people around you. And I think that's where the sort of bravado and swagger comes about, because, okay, in the outside world where you don't necessarily know the people around you and you don't work with them on a regular basis, even if you do, you kind of like, you're not in, like, the times you go out with these people is like, going to staff drinks, it's always in the good mixer of things. It's never in the sort of real pressure
Yeah,
cooker like situation. So you can't really say, I trust you 100% because we've been in the worst situation. I know what type of person you are in
yeah,
that worst situation. I think if you're in any of the services, be that military all the way up to like say the ambulance service, like you see the real pressure on a
yeah.
day-to-day basis. So you can know who you can trust.
Mm.
So if you can be humble and vulnerable with regards to you will be more humble and vulnerable when it comes to your leadership rather than, yeah, I work in this company. Uh, I am the one, which isn't necessarily true, you know?
I love the concept of trust, and you're right. I think trusting those around you is so important. I think trusting yourself as well is really really important. And the other observation I'd make with trust is it can take years to build, and it can take seconds to destroy.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that's always got to be remembered because it's such a precious commodity, and it can make all the difference from everyone being on the same side, thinking, right, we're all in this together,
Mm.
to going, oh, I'm just going to look after myself because no one else is looking after me.
Oh no, absolutely. And you see when those sort of bonds of trust are broken, uh, far too often, like either on the media or stories told, and
Mm,
those people, those groups, you're very sort of hard pushed, and it
yeah,
comes down to I don't have any other options. I'll
yeah.
go with you, but I know it's not doesn't feel quite right if you get what I mean.
I do, yeah, and I think we don't necessarily need to get into a discussion about this, but the way that social media has evolved recently, well, over time, I suppose, this sort of controlling a narrative for any organization is so difficult because they'll have their external messaging that they want to give out,
Yes.
um, which then mixes in with the internal messages on social media. And it can appear then as if an organization's actually giving out mixed messages or trying to be slightly disingenuous with their messaging. and
Yeah.
and I think traditional organizations are struggling to get to grips with the fact that external and internal communications are all sort of a melee of a mix of one now.
Yeah. No, but like this is the thing, like the and like it's one of these things which has become a realization, not from the inception of social media or whatnot, but over the last couple of years. Social media, it's true, but it's not true.
Yeah,
It's got this weird amplification of I like if you say one thing, it can get amplified by the power of 10,
yeah,
power of 20. But when you really sort of, if you could take the time to sort of do a deep dive, you're like, oh, wait, it's 20 people dotted all over the world. And
yeah.
let's just say I wouldn't trust them with a butter knife, let alone anything else. But you get what I mean?
I do, yeah, and it takes me back actually to being at school and studying history, and being asked to look at newspaper reports and looking at them, going, all right, so who wrote it? When did they write it? So what would their agenda have been when they wrote it? What are they not saying? And I sort of look at, we were just taught that as basic sort of be critical of what you're reading, and I don't know that a lot of that happens with social media. People think it's fact.
Oh, now people think it's fact, but like the whole thing is it sort of goes with the sort of American adage, if it bleeds, it leads. If it
Yeah,
so if you get clicks, it leads. And like you just like it gets out there very, very, very quickly. And if you look at some things, you're like, oh, okay, if you're on LinkedIn, I'm using LinkedIn as an example of the most sort of I less extreme version of social media there is right
yeah,
now. you will see a post come up once, and then yeah, maybe 2, 3 days later, you'll see it come up twice, 3 times, being posted originally by this person, where they've most already copied, paste, and like, yeah, oh, it got a lot of engagement. I'm gonna repurpose that, put my make put my own spin on it, or like they'll just copy it verbatim, and away they go. So if it happens like that on a sort of calm, tame social media platform like LinkedIn, Twitter, insane, like the dumpster fire of the internet at this present time. Like, yeah, look at TikTok, you looked at all of these different social media platforms. Like, yeah, it's now going on, like, yeah, rocket fuel with
Yeah.
regards to getting that engagement. So yeah, it is very hard to hold that narrative. And yeah, one word can take you into a very weird place where people want to counsel you one day. And now, like the whole sort of realm of counseling, I don't believe it exists anymore. It just, as long, like, if you wait 48 hours, a week, people have forgotten about you most of the time, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I just find that fascinating in terms of leadership, in terms of trust.
Mm.
Um, it's a it's just a very interesting environment to try and build and sustain trust. Um, it's also, I think, quite an interesting place for someone to uh, see whether they're being challenged as well. Because I think if you are in a position of authority and being a leader, you need to be prepared to be challenged. But I'm not sure that social media is a healthy place to absorb those challenges. So I find it a fascinating, and I must admit, I tend to observe rather than get involved in social media because I'm still not convinced I know quite where it's going to end up. So I'm waiting for it to grow up a bit.
Yeah, well, it's never going to grow up. It's like on that crazy rock like ride, and you see where it goes. But like this is the thing. Like, if you're like, I would say to anyone, if they're like getting into an argument with someone on social media, more times than not, it's why. Like okay, if they've got a problem with your leadership style and everything like this, more times than not, you'll be able to, I would say, brush it off and like go
Mm,
nonsense. The only time when it kind of stings is if you know, and this is where your subconscious kicks into play, if they've just hit on like a little nerve on the button, and then you got to like, okay,
yeah,
you can decide to engage with it, but if it's like on,
yeah.
acknowledge it and yeah, possibly fix it, I would say.
That's really interesting. So I sort of on a similar theme. I was talking to somebody about the emotion of resentment. And
Oh,
yeah, and sort of things. So where does resentment come from? And Brené Brown's really good on this because she thought it sort of connected with anger. But actually, it's part of the jealousy family. So if you resent somebody, it's often because they are doing something that you would like to do yourself. So
yes.
if something on social media just pings that bit of you where you think, right, I want to get in there and get angry, it most probably is because it's holding a mirror up to you, and it's worth just pausing and reflecting a bit internally. So yeah, that's those kind of emotions. It's always good to understand where they come from, isn't it? But that comes back to self-awareness.
Yeah. And like that's one of the things I think most people find it very tricky, because the self-awareness in this conversation has come up a couple of times. But here's the thing. There is not a lot of people who actually take the time to research and study themselves to
Mm,
actually figure out what type of person they are. Look, I often say people know themselves maybe 30, 40%
mm,
truly know themselves. If you meet someone who goes, I know myself 100%, and they look at you in the eyes and you just see, yeah, they have done and seen things which, you know what I mean? Like, you go, okay, I don't want to be around you. You like you've gone, like, you've looked into the abyss, and like you've blinked a couple of times and you liked it. It's like, it's like all right. not many people can go like, yeah, I know some people can't even say they know themselves 30, 40%.
Yeah.
They like know themselves 20, maybe 10%.
Mm.
And they are living someone else's life and like thinking that is me because that's held up as the ideal. They haven't actually looked at what the ideal can be possibly for them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that really resonates with me. And you know, to go back to my Air Force career,
Mm,
I think when people, and you'll see the connection here in a moment,
yes.
when people belong to a very ethos focused, purpose led organization,
Oh yeah.
they can, and you know, this definitely was how I felt. You sort of absorb the standards of that organization, the aspirations of the organization into yourself. And it can take a long time to think, well, actually, what do I want as an individual, or who do I stand for as an individual, rather than just the organization that you're in.
Yes. No, but this is like this is where it sometimes hurts, like servicemen and servicewomen who come out of the military. Because look, when like if you're in the Air Force, the Army, Navy, like Marine, you have this burning North Star of this is what we're gonna do. This is mine, like get up, this is what we're gonna do. Bam, 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 bam. As you said earlier, you like to have a day where it was more structured rather than like when you were doing answers. Like, oh, I've got all this time running around. But when that North Star is not there, when that sort of guiding light is not there anymore, it can be very hard to like find this new realm of purpose. And
Yeah.
especially if you've had days where it's like, yes, this is what you're doing. And if you haven't got those sort of coping mechanisms, not strategies to sort of
Mm.
like find those new, like find that new star or put like structure into your day-to-day life, I think that's where so many like service people fall down.
Yeah.
And it hurts because I think it's a case of, and like, I'm not here to judge the military in any way or whatnot, but I do think there is something what needs to be done to help service
Mm.
people find that new North Star, find that new purpose, because it ain't easy. And it's not just the British, it's everywhere, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it is just the military. I think the military does, it is quite high profile because it's always seen as something very dutiful that people are doing for the country rather than for themselves. But I think people in big corporate organizations also experience that. Teachers do, you know, definitely in the NHS. I think people do as well. But you're absolutely right that when you, it's almost as if the framework in which you've operated has allowed you to not develop a part of yourself because it takes care of it.
Yeah.
It might not be a complete analogy, but you know, if you're a values-led individual, but you just think, well, the Air Force, you know, the values are respect, integrity, service, ethos. Oh, that works for me. And then you don't check in every now and again with yourself to say, am I living by my values? Is this right? You can then sort of find out that 20 years later, you're like, well, my values are over here. The organization's values are over here. No wonder I'm feeling slightly disconnected from what I want to do. To go back to your point, though, I think I don't know about the American military. The British military does a very good package in terms of transitioning people into civilian life. There's long periods of time where you get, you know, courses to help you. And there are charities also that can do some really good sort of counselling and stuff for individuals.
Okay.
But quite often you have to know about it and ask for it.
Uh,
And I wonder whether a lot of people do know that, because I think some people sort of think, oh, well, I've got 7 weeks to do my, we call it resettlement training, you know, oh, in 7 weeks I'll be fine. It's like, no, if you've been in for over 20 years, 7 weeks is not going to put you in a good place.
7 weeks, you'll be fine. Oh, that's okay.
But sorry, I'm reflecting on myself more than anyone. When you're in the military and you're very task focused, it's like,
Yeah.
right, so I have 7 weeks, and by the end of 7 weeks, I'll be a civilian. Right, fine, yep, task done, off we go.
So, not how did that 7 weeks go for you?
I'm now, I think I'm what, 6 months I left, and every month I think, oh, I'm this month I've made progress. I'm definitely more settled than I was. And then I look back on my previous self and go, well, you thought you were settled last month. No, you weren't. So I think someone said to me it can actually take a couple of years to really shed the uniform. It sort of goes in layers, because you sort of think, okay, well, I've left the role, I've left the housing, okay, I've left the uniform, but then it's actually settling into the new community you're in, it's getting new employment, it's establishing a community, not constantly referring to yourself as, well, I used to be Air Force or I used to be Army. That's always a key indicator.
When was the last time you said that? Come on.
I've probably said it at least a couple of times this week.
Okay, I was like, I used to be there. Oh no, I'm still there.
It's just such a strong part of my identity. I don't think I'll ever let it go completely.
I don't think, no, I don't think anyone ever could. And I think it's one of those things. I don't think anyone should ever do that, because it is something what made a fundamental makeup of who you are. And if you took that away from yourself, you're no longer who you are. And like, yeah, it's always going to exist within you. It's just a case of finding your new self. That's the whole thing. And yeah, you can, like, people can either use it as something to look back at past glories and keep themselves in the past, or look to it as, yeah, putting a light on a new pathway and becoming that new person you want to be,
Yeah.
whatever that
And,
should be.
and I think that's where, and again, coaching can really help with this actually, is leaving an organization well. It becomes
Yeah.
so important. I mean, I feel very grateful because I chose to leave at the point I did. I still loved the Air Force. It was offering me a very good career going forward. And I decided, no, everyone's got to leave at some point, and this is my time to go. So I sort of felt like I was in control of it. And I sort of felt like it was a positive decision for all the reasons you said. I wanted to know who I was. I wanted to find my identity. I wanted a second career. I do feel for people who have to leave on medical grounds or who are made redundant and not necessarily by choice. And I think for anyone who's going through that sort of breakup from a job, looking for extra support and just taking the time to establish who you are is probably really worth investing in, because I suppose it's like any sort of relationship, isn't it? The better it ends, the more likely you are to take the positives out of it and be able to move forward rather than resent it for too long.
I would say yes. I would say if you end the relationship amicably, then you like, as you say, if some people were forced out for medical reasons, or like they're made redundant, they might still have, how can I say, the rose tinted romantic glasses of what it was. Whereas it's like a case of, you go, yeah, with your situation, you went, yes, I want different things, but I want this,
Yeah,
like, and the Air Force went, but we want this for you. But it's like, I want different things. I think we've grown
yeah,
apart.
yeah,
You
yeah.
go your
And
way, I'll go mine. Let's stay good friends. So it
yeah,
it sounds a little bit cliched, but that's the way. Yeah,
That is a brilliant way of describing it. And I know you can't put that directly onto relationships, but, you know, it is sort of up till this point, it's worked really nicely. I've now projected forward and realized that actually my heart's not going to be in it as much. So I'm going to consciously decide to move away so we can stay friends.
Yeah.
And I think it's worked really nicely for me. I wouldn't have wanted to have stayed in for any longer because I think I would have had less enthusiasm, less energy to put into it. I might even have started to become a bit bitter, not because of anything the Air Force did, but because you know, I've mentioned several times I wanted to be in the Air Force to be fit and active. I loved being outside doing everything, and the more I stayed in, the more successful I was getting, and the more that meant I was staying at a desk planning for other people to go out and be active and do all the fun stuff. But I was just at a desk planning, and I was like, this is not what I wanted in life.
Wait a second. Yes, you may have been planning, but you still were going out there doing triathlons. Sicko.
I was, yes. And the Air Force was brilliant in supporting me doing triathlons as well. But it was becoming more of a I think if I just tell you this story because I quite like this. So on my I got promoted to the rank of group captain in my last couple of years, which is a full colonel in the army.
Nice.
People tend to understand that language a bit more. And I actually ended up going on the army course for newly promoted colonels. And there were about 100 of us on this course. I think there were about 7 females, the rest were all men. And I was sat in this auditorium and I was looking at these tired looking, grey looking, overweight individuals who we had 20 years previously been running over the Brecon Beacons together, full of life, fit and healthy. And it just made me think, I'm now at the point of life that unless I consciously choose to be active, I'm going to become completely sedentary and I will do nothing other than sit in a car or sit at a desk all of my life. And that was a real turning point for me where it was like, okay, so to what extent is fitness such a strong value for me that I'm prepared to shape my life around it rather than the other way around?
So okay, I get it. Now, I've got to say, doing like a colonel course in the army, coming from the Air Force, sounds a little bit trippy to me. But that's another stop. Yeah, it doesn't kind of like, okay, I hear it, but it doesn't make sense in the same. But I might be wrong. It worked out nicely for you because you got the promotion and like, yeah.
It was, I think there was one person from the Air Force and one person from the Navy were invited to go onto this course so that we could go back into our own services to say, is this something that we want to offer our newly promoted individuals? So it was just a bit of, we did the world that I was in, although I was Air Force, I did most of my work with the Army and with the Navy. So it was completely what I was used to doing. I was very used to being with the Army and the Navy most of my career.
I see. Oh, okay. I see.
I promise you, it was nothing suspicious or trippy about it at all.
No. Yeah. I still think it's some like covert scheme for aliens, but that's another story. Yeah. So now, coming out of the army, the Royal Air Force, you see it's on my mind now. It's like coming out of the Royal Air Force, coming into like the realm of coaching. Like why coaching? You mentioned you didn't want to be sedentary and you wanted to build something around fitness, but like what was like, why did it sort of spark so hard for you? What was that sort of initial thought?
Yeah, so it goes back to about 2018 actually, because when I talk about the leadership coaching, the executive coaching, that is separate from the physical activity. I am also a triathlon coach, but it's very much leadership coaching that I do. So 2018, 2018 was one of those years for me. I'm sure you've had them where everything just is totally Instagrammable. You know, you've got all the photos of success. I was getting a job that I wanted in the Air Force. I was about to go and command the RAF's High Readiness Logistics Unit. My parents were fit and healthy, and I was seeing loads of them. My triathlon, I was doing personal best because just turned 40, but I was sort of absolutely nailing it in terms of triathlon. And best of all, I was getting married, and it was just one of those years where it was fantastic. And then I got a phone call from the doctor saying that I had a BRCA2 gene, which meant that I was very, very high risk of cancer. So 75% chance of breast cancer and 25% chance of ovarian cancer. And that was a seismic moment for me, because it made me realize that no matter how fit I was, actually my health wasn't in my control. Now, the NHS were amazing and they really supported me through it. And I ended up having regular checkups now for breast cancer, which is keeping me healthy. And I had an operation for ovarian cancer, which put me into menopause immediately, but reduced my risk of ovarian cancer. Anyway, so what it made me do was it was another moment, a bit like Iraq, where, okay, so who am I? What am I about? Where am I going with life? And this whole sort of, I don't have control over my health, made me think, what am I going to do with this? And I decided I wasn't going to spiral downwards. I was going to really use this as a moment to build myself up and help other people. So I ended up doing a master's in applied positive psychology. So really learning about the science behind resilience, about the role of emotions in decision making, about strength, about mindfulness, self-awareness. And that was when I began to realize that this was the model for my own leadership. It really resonated with me. It was a very optimistic way of leading. It really resonated with human beings, because actually it was a way of connecting with people that was quite deep and connected to their sense of purpose, to the meaning that they had in life, and to their own sort of desire to grow and develop. And that then led me on to applying positive psychology through the means of coaching. So I went on, after having done a master's in positive psychology, I got the bug for adult learning, went and did master's study level in coaching. And I began to realize that I've actually been a coach all of my life, because that's my natural style of leading. I now just had the language with which to apply it. And I was so taken with this idea that I was all full of, right, I'm going to change the Air Force by being a coach and create this coaching culture within the Air Force.
Oh, sorry.
I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist and I think big. I can't help it.
No worries. No.
But then I also then realized that I was almost hiding. Sorry, I felt as if I was hiding within the Air Force. I'd got all this new knowledge. I'd got this new joy. And I knew I could have a really positive influence on people as a coach. And I just thought, it's time to scare myself a bit. I want to do something very different. And so I decided to set myself up as a coach.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Because this is the thing, one of the things I would say to anyone, and the comfort zone for people's lives it's real, it's lovely. It's a nice space, but you don't grow in the comfort zone. You stay nice, warm, cozy. Let me turn the TV, but there's no sort of challenge. Even in the Air Force with yourself, and people are going, but the Air Force is quite a challenging environment. No, it's quite comfortable if you're doing well in it. So
that is so perceptive, because yes, people will go, oh, the Air Force, military, it must be challenging, but it was almost as if the challenge was just on one part of my brain, and there was another part of my brain, sort of I don't know whether it was a creative side or just the bit that hadn't been utilized for a while, that I thought, this is the bit I want to spark, because I've got used to the challenges of being in the military. So actually they didn't feel like they were a challenge anymore.
Yes.
So I don't know when you first decided to do your marathon, But I know when I first decided to do a long distance triathlon, it was back in 2006, and the challenge was so big. I thought, right, I am focused. This is, it is such a big challenge. I'm completely focused. I'm going to grow through this. This is going to make me feel uncomfortable. And I wanted that kind of challenge, which I just wasn't going to get in the Air Force because I'd been in it for 23 years.
Yeah, no, but that creative side, especially in the military, like where you are doing that, it's going to atrophy and like basically getting that workout, getting that to all work. It's like, okay, if you're starting out doing long distance running or whatnot, like, okay, like the first time you do a mile, you go, okay, that's painful. You do 3 sessions of doing a mile and like you build it up, build it up, build it up. You got to kind of switch off, like for the sort of beginning stages. Before you know it, you're like going, okay, yeah, I can do 10 miles. Not be a problem. So yeah, getting that sort of muscle back working must have been a little bit of hard work in the beginning. And
It still is, to be honest. It still is, because there are still times where my brain is used to how the military was asking me to do things, and I'm not enjoying the freedoms that I've now got. And you realize, well, at least I'm beginning to realize that, and I'm trying to think of a good example of this. I'm just used to pitching up for work at a certain time in the day and then working until a certain time, and it being a very routine, organized life. And my husband would say to me, but you can do what you like now. You're self-employed. You can choose whether you work in the morning and then not in the afternoon when you do your training. Yeah, so it's even just basic stuff like that I am slightly institutionalized, but I'm just needing, you're right, I've got that muscle that needs to just go a bit stronger, and I'm now in control of my life. And it's if it doesn't, the other way of looking at it as well is that in the military, an awful lot of work came to me because I was in a set role. And if I pitched up in the morning, people would come to me and I would just have to get stuff done. Now, because I'm self-employed, no one really cares that I'm a leadership coach. I've got to go and let them know. And that's a very, very different way of working.
how is like, okay, look, like I work in sales is my daytime. Okay. Now, in sales, there is account management and there's like, cold calling. Like, one's considered farming, one's considered hunting. Now you've gone from a very sort of farming institution. Now you're having to hunt. How is the hunting lifestyle for you? What do you love? What do you hate? What?
Oh, oh my goodness me. We could start again, I think, on this one. I am so well suited to coaching. I'm not a very confident person in terms of saying stuff like this, but I know I'm a very good coach. It is absolutely what I'm good at. Being an entrepreneur and self-employed is not my natural place at all. If you can think about the military, it's all about the team. You never talk about yourself. It's always about what you would. And now, being self-employed, I'm having to go out and talk to people about what I do and about what results I can get. So I'm being guided by an amazing lady who is a marketeer by background, but she tells me that marketing is just a conversation. And so she's trying to get me to realize that actually just talking to people is the important thing. And I love talking to people, so I'm okay with that.
I haven't noticed, no.
Well, you're very easy to have a conversation with, so you're ideal.
Yes, there you go. I'm ideal. It's like, yes, the ego, bring it on. It's like,
but that's the thing that I'm really struggling with is just selling myself, I suppose, because I'm just not used to doing that. But I think that's part of the growth journey that I've challenged myself with, and just getting myself comfortable with finding a way of farming, even if actually what I'm trying to do is hunt, is most probably the way that I would describe it.
Mm, mm. Now, oh, dare I say, like, have you considered starting a YouTube channel or something along those lines?
I haven't, but it's I yeah I that that's I'm so far from that, but I'd be quite intrigued to do something like that at some point.
Yeah, because like this is the thing. You're a person who likes to talk to people and you do like coaching. I think with regards to the wealth of knowledge you have and like the sort of your personality and your style, I think give you a little bit of time in front of the camera to get comfortable. Yeah, I think your natural personality will come and shine through. Also, if you were doing something like, hey, like a podcast, where you could actually sort of sit down and talk to like many different people on a regular basis, I think that would also add to that as well. So you are casting your net far and wide, getting your message out there, where you might say you're passively fishing, and yeah,
Yeah,
so like when you do actively go out there and hunt, you can like go, this is an example of the body of evidence of my work and
yeah,
conversations I do. Like what I do. This is what I'm about. And yeah, you can sort of use that as the start of a funnel of people coming your way.
yeah. That's I like Lacey. You're just natural, aren't you, at this? But that's I must admit, I would love to do a podcast because I think there aren't many female voices talking about leadership. And I think that's most probably a bit of a gap that I would like to fill because I find that although my coaching is specifically aimed at women, I
Mhm.
even find myself not talking about female leaders because females don't recognize themselves as leaders. I talk about women in leadership roles because they seem to think that leadership is something slightly separate from them. I'd love to get women embodying leadership more.
Yes, I think this is the thing. I think there are a lot of ladies talking about leadership, but there are not a lot of ladies who I would say truly, practically have had to like have leadership
Mm,
in the world out there because they go, oh, I was a leader of this. And you're like, oh, okay, like you were in a corporate setting which pretty much run by itself like clockwork doesn't and like this replace lady with gent and it's like yeah you still didn't really have that much sort of leadership. You
mm.
like what was the thing, like what was the trials and tribulations you had which like okay, this is like this crunch situation went down, this was the sort of scenarios and like these are the sort of strategies we put into place to make that happen. And you go like oh, I don't think there's many people, let alone ladies, which have got your wealth of experience behind them to like carry that out. Um,
Yeah.
that's where I think, yeah, you're on a sort of key winner.
Mm.
Your unique like sales proposition is right there. And I think, yeah, you push that. I think you're like I think you've got the potential to knock it out of the park on several levels. It just comes down to what strategy you want to pick. And look, you being 6 months out, let's just like, well, it's like, it's, you can't, like, I've became a father like, should be coming on to 8 months on the 15th of this. Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Like, thank you. And every time I sort of like, every time I go, this is what it's all about, la la la, blah, blah, blah. It's like building on shifting sand. You can't like whatever you think is right today, forget today. Whatever you think is right in the moment is wrong in the next. And I think you're kind of in that sort of realm right
Mm.
now. you are building, but there is some elements which are like it's shifting sand.
Yeah.
When you hit that bedrock, be that 6 months, 18 months from now, yeah, I think you'll be like, okay, right. I think, yeah, get out there, getting like play the contact sport of getting to know people and like have these conversations. And yeah, like I think you could like skyrocket quite quickly. Honestly, that's being like truthful.
It's lovely for you to say that. I must admit, I am trying to get out there. I am sort of trying to get involved in the contact sport. It's interesting that there's a bit of me that's trying to protect myself. I I think part of getting out there and talking to people is also discovering myself, and that's part of the shifting sands. And actually, that analogy that you used of the shifting sands and 8-month-old and stuff, it really does resonate, because it is how I feel every month. I'm thinking, oh, I've got this nailed, and
Mm,
then it's just laughing at myself, going, I thought I had it nailed last month. No, I've got it nailed this month.
yeah.
But I'm also a really impatient person, so I want it all now.
I hear you. I hear you. I absolutely hear you. And what I would simply say to you is do a podcast. The reason
Mhm.
why I say do a podcast, okay. Now, we've had a charming conversation. We've got on well. And like, yes, one day when I'm in Cheltenham, I'm sure we'll raise a glass together in each other's company. If I gave you a call,
Mhm.
just a cold call, yeah, you most probably wouldn't give like you'll be like, okay, not unless I've had something really compelling, what you really wanted, you would be trying to get rid of me quite quickly. At this present time, you have spent a good hour and 20 minutes having a conversation with me, quite happy as Larry.
Yeah,
It's how you can draw many a person in if you
yeah.
want to. And like, yes, and with that, building a team of allies, not necessarily the same sort of model, but something which you
Mhm.
can really shape and form of people who are like-minded. And yeah, you can like you can pull together in the same direction. I'm not talking about something military-esque or anything like this, but something completely unique to who you are and the individuals who will assemble with you at that time.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. Really good. Yeah. So getting a podcast sounds terrifying, but I'd love to do that. And I mean, part of what I want to do, although I'm at the moment looking at coaching individually,
Mhm.
I have got this aim of building up a community of people around me, and I want it to be of women who are in leadership roles, but they want to be active, so that we almost get into a position of group coaching, so
Mm.
that actually it's more than just one-to-one support. It's a whole community of individuals who share the same values, who've got the same beliefs, and want to really support one another. So that's where I want to go in the long term.
Mm. How do you build a community?
Step by step.
Yeah, so put it this way, you've had experience of helping capturing the hearts and minds of people far flung in other lands and
Mhm.
helping like build those communities. Just like, yeah, take
Yeah.
learn from there and like, you know what I mean, apply it to like this yeah,
Yeah.
crazy whack-a-mole world we living right now, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like have to ask final question. Now, if there was three things you could achieve in the next 6 months, like with your impatient self, what would those three things be?
What, for business or anything, or
Business, personal, and
yeah,
hey, with your loving husband, say.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I always see life very holistically anyway. So what I would love to do is for us to have a sustainable life here in Cheltenham, because we're still sort of both, because although my husband left the military, he was army a long time ago. Actually, me leaving has been sort of both of us leaving. So a nice sustainable life in Cheltenham for us would be good. Um, I'd like to be coaching regularly. That's a really, core of what I'm wanting to do. I've got quite a few clients at the moment, but I would like that to be something that takes me out of not just public sector and the military, where I'm doing a lot of coaching, but into the private sector as well. And the final one is I want to be happy. That's the most important thing for me. So I think those would be my three things: sustainable life, sustainable business, and be happy.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I'm sure. I'm sure with your mindset, dedication, and drive, yeah, you'll make it happen. Yeah. Ah, ah. Debs, thank you for coming on today. You have been exceptional. You have been a star. Can you tell the lovely people how they can find you out on the interwebs?
Yes, if I'm on LinkedIn. So if you look at Debs Wright, and please do contact me either by DM, or my contact details are on there. It would be lovely to make contact with people.
Perfect. I will put all of this in the description. So yes, contact her, get that leadership going. Ah,
You
yeah.
are. That's been fantastic. Thanks so much, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. I can't believe how quickly the time's flown, but you've made that a really wonderful experience.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you for coming on. You have been a delight, Debs. I'd like to say thank you to you, my friends, my life warriors, for sticking with us to the end of this show. Please stay well, stay safe, be awesome, be excellent, be fantastic. Be all the positive bees you can be in this world and then some. And remember, you're not alone in this world. Hey, peace. And we are.